It's really a framework, both as a mechanism for a company to think through, its purpose, its tenets, its values, but also how a management team really operates and how a company operates. It's allowing everyone to have a common strategy to win together. It's an ability for them to understand that their part of what they do in the business has meaning and purpose. By being successful within the company, it's being successful for them as an individual, and then also within their family, perhaps, or their community at large. They understand, obviously, seeing revenue growth equals opportunity, right? Profitability of a company. You're almost trying to gamify the ability to actually create a sustainable and profitable business. The notion of actually creating synthetic roles or agentic roles changes our dynamic of our business dramatically.
Welcome to CEOs Unscripted, the podcast where real talk drives real growth and delivers real results for mid-market leaders like you. I'm your host, Jane Gentry, and each week we're pulling back the curtain on the unfiltered stories of CEOs, founders, and executives who face the highs and lows and everything in between. After 20 years of consulting in enterprise and then experiencing firsthand the reality of being a CEO in a mid-sized company, I discovered why they say it's loneliest at the top. For most mid-market CEOs, there's no handbook. You learn through trial and error or by reaching outside your organization for help. That's exactly why I created CEOs Unscripted, a bi-weekly podcast by mid-market CEOs for mid-market CEOs. Each episode offers an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at the wins, the losses, and the playbooks shared by CEOs and founders who've been where you are. No fluff, no jargon, just unscripted, honest conversations about what it takes to lead, grow, and scale in today's business landscape. If you're ready for candid conversations, real-world insights, and lessons from leaders who've walked the path, you're in the right place. So grab a seat at the table because it's time to get real. This is CEOs Unscripted. Thank you for joining us again on CEOs Unscripted. Today, I have Raj Choudhury. Choudhury, tell me how to pronounce your last name correctly.
You got it right, Jane. Choudhury, yeah.
Oh, look at me go. Okay. And Raj owns a marketing agency called Alloy and a PE firm. So we're going to get into a couple of these things today, Raj. But first off, I just force everybody to tell us their backstory. And we want the juicy part. We don't want the stuff we can see on LinkedIn. So tell us where you came from.
Sounds good. I'll try and give you the very condensed view of it. I'll start off by saying that I was born in East Africa in Uganda, so I've kind of a weird background on how I even got to the States. I lived there until I was about 10, and then moved to England and did my schooling and everything else in England. And somehow fell in love with snowboarding, traveling around the world. And in between all of that, I ended up starting a web design company with my college roommate from Charlotte when I was an exchange student over here. So I was gallivanting basically around the world, designing websites, and he was coding things. And eventually, this is during college days, Jeff graduated, my partner, Jeff Hellmeyer, and he moved to Atlanta, and he asked me to come over here from New Zealand. So I packed up my snowboard and came over to Atlanta to find absolutely zero snow. But found an entire career here. So I've had several agencies. I've started up and built up and sold over the years, as well as a couple of different runs as a tech CEO for acquired companies. And a lot of my background's been that, right? It's been basically in the M&A space within the agency space specifically, both as investor, buyer, seller. And, I've called Atlanta home for, 25 years, which is kind of crazy. I still have a hint of an English accent, not much. My sisters tell me when I go back. I have 3 kids, and, Atlanta's been home to me for a while. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, you and I are almost, let's see, I think I've got you beat by a few years in Atlanta. It's hard to leave once you're here, even with
It
no
is.
snow. Although I have to say, I'm a fan of no snow. That's one of the reasons I'm here. So I don't feel
Well,
bad at all that you have to leave the city to go find snow.
exactly. The airport makes things very, very easy. So,
Yeah. Busiest airport in the world, right? So, so let's talk a little bit, Raj, about let's move off of Alloy for a second and talk about your PE firm, because some interesting things came out of our early conversation about your PE firm. Tell me the way that works.
sure. So, private equity company is a fund called Purpose Group, and within the fund, we have something called the Purpose Playbook, which is really helping management teams think through how to structure their company, think through the uh, purpose, tenets, and values of the company, and then really think through how to construct an open management structure, an open accounting structure within the organization. So it's really myself, my old college roommate, Jeff Hellmeyer, and we have another partner, David Cummings, who's an investor in town. And really what we do is we have kind of two tracks. One is, what we call S1, a very complicated name, is strategy one, essentially, where we buy and hold these really blue collar businesses, typically, in the business to business sector, but typically very localized. So, as an example, we own a print and apparel company in central Kentucky called Gerald Printing. We have about 6 different locations throughout, and we bought that from an owner who's looking to exit, and you see that a lot. The owner didn't have kids who wanted to take over the business, or just a natural kind of point to kind of pass the business to someone else. So we bought the business, but we also retained the legacy of that business and also what that business meant in the community. In this case, mainly in Bowling Green, but also some of the surrounding towns and cities. And we're the largest provider out there, and so we provide jobs for 80 plus folks, and we're there to build on that business, not to kind of tear it down or strip it and sell it. So it's a very different model to a lot of PEs who tend to go in and kind of tack on and strip away elements. We understand the value of one, what these companies have built, the legacy and the communities that they've built, but also how to kind of reinfuse a sense of purpose and a sense of future kind of ownership in the business. So we try and put new management techniques, and obviously use new techniques within technology and marketing and so forth to kind of revitalize that business and kind of build it up. So we really don't look to sell those at all. On the other side, we have S2, again, going with a very complicated name here.
You guys are so scientific.
I know, exactly. Jeff and I were like pondering over this and thought, oh yeah, S1, S2, that sounds good. Yeah, let's just do that. S2 is really the agency platform. Alloy is the agency, and so within there, we're acquiring other agencies to build up basically higher volume and really kind of penetrate the market in a different way, build a different type of agency architecture there. In this case, Alloy is really focused on technology brands. So we service mid-market technology brands, as well as some large nonprofits. And we go kind of end-to-end from branding to creative to PR to CX and digital. So we kind of look to acquire both sides of things, where we can have different standalone units on the S1 side. And the S2, we're really buying them and pulling them right into the Alloy platform.
So you might not think so, because we're only 6 minutes into this conversation, but there is so much there that I would like to dig into with you. So let's start with S1, the blue collar companies that you buy and hold. You referred to a purpose playbook. What is that?
Yeah. So Jeff, my partner, is the author of the Purpose Playbook. And it's really a framework, both as a mechanism for a company to think through, its purpose, its tenets, its values, but also how a management team really operates and how a company operates. So it's almost basically a playbook. Is essentially what it is, and we basically put that in place, and we train and coach our managers. So you can think of it like this, right? A lot of these businesses, the, the talent that exists in there, they often don't have exposure into what a P&L is, what a balance sheet is, what it means to be profitable, what it doesn't mean to be profitable, the consequences of those things. They're normally kept really from a closed book standpoint. They don't know what's going on. Right. So they're making decisions really, or even in most cases, they don't have access to make decisions. And so, it's a big transition when they go from, a founder organization that kind of keeps it more of a closed book type framework. And so we have to almost re-educate not only the management team, but the entire staff to understand why and why this has meaning for them and why it actually affects them. And how it can go through. So, the framework is something we strive to kind of drive into the teams, and so they understand. And it's not overnight. It takes time to kind of understand those and understand the decisions, and also give them autonomy to make decisions. You'd be surprised how little autonomy a lot of middle management don't have at all. To make decisions, and especially in these kind of
I'm not surprised.
Businesses.
Actually, I see it every day. Yeah. I'm surprised at the success in light of that. Is what I get surprised at. Right?
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you definitely see a kind of the typical structure is a very kind of command and control, right?
Yes.
And so we go the other way from the command and control.
Yeah, and I tell people even the military doesn't use command and control leadership anymore. Really. So why are we, so two things you hit on there that I think are interesting. And I know you're speaking for Jeff because it's Jeff's book. But I'm aware of a group that you belong to in Atlanta called Conscious Capitalism. And so when you use a word like purpose, which people throw around all the time with various meanings, what is the purpose of the Purpose Playbook? Like, if you could just cull it down into a sentence or two, what is the purpose of running a business that way for you guys?
Yeah. So first off, I think it's allowing everyone to have a common strategy to win together, right? It's an ability for them to understand that their part of what they do in the business has meaning and purpose, right? And that by being successful within the company, it's being successful for them as an individual, and then also within their family, perhaps, or their community at large, right? So it's trying to tie those things together, not that, hey, you've just got a 9-to-5 job and it's a paycheck and that's it, right? We're trying to basically fuse the two together, right? That by you being successful at, in this case, Gerald, or even Alloy, your life is going to be hopefully more successful. The community around you is going to be more successful, right? You understand, the reasons why, as opposed to spinning and making something up in your head and assuming why.
And other than experientially, what metrics do you leverage for them to be able to see that?
Yeah. So they understand, obviously, seeing revenue growth equals opportunity, right? Profitability of a company, right? Understanding the expenses of a company and why that changes, an outcome. If you've got wastage as an example, right? It doesn't benefit you ultimately. It doesn't benefit your group, and so forth. So it's also building empathy around others around you. So it's not just your role, but your role affects other people. And their role affects you, and so forth.
But success of a company, Raj, doesn't always translate to success for me as the guy on the shop floor or the person out fixing the air conditioners, right?
It should, though, shouldn't it?
Oh, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Yeah. I just want you to dig in a little more, because I hear people use, I was on yesterday with an upcoming guest, and oh no, that's a lie. I was listening to the podcast that's going to launch next week. And this CEO is very purpose driven as well. But we toss around these terms like purpose. We say things like our employees are our differentiator, our employees are the most important thing to our company. And while that is true, it's kind of a no-brainer. It doesn't always translate down to that person, right? Especially in privately held organizations. And so, for the sake of the audience, I'm just trying to get you to be a little bit more specific, because I want them to see what that looks like. I know you do it. I want them to understand a little bit better. What does that look like? Do you tie it to comp? Is it, how are you driving purpose down to that very, the person that would be considered the lowest level person that most people don't pay attention to in the organization? Yeah. How do we tie it to that person?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a comp element to this, right? I think in a lot of cases there can be a comp element, and sometimes there's also, an equity element into this, right?
That's putting your money where your mouth is.
That's right. Now, we haven't gone to the extent of being, a fully ESOP type company, right? That is truly putting where your mouth is on that side of things, right? And that's obviously, you need more scale to kind of operate within an ESOP. And I don't know if your audience is familiar with ESOPs in general, but, that's where a company is fully owned in general by, the employees, if you will, at least 30% of the company, right? In our case, we are trying to incentivize with both comp, right, and equity where it makes sense, right? And in a lot of cases, it's really understanding, giving someone an understanding that, hey, as a company, we're making these decisions, and as a result, this is how it's going to affect you individually, right? It's as simple as sometimes just explaining the why around a decision and how it has a positive effect or even a negative effect, and being very truthful about that, as opposed to kind of just, shoving it underneath the carpet. So oftentimes it's buy-in, right? It's buy-in to understand that decision point. In the case of Gerald, we're putting in something. Have you heard of the Great Game of Business?
The Great Game of Business? Okay, no.
Yeah, it's another kind of framework, right? But it basically allows folks to, you can start gamifying the business itself, right? Hey, instead of ordering from 3 different suppliers, and you made the decision to order from a single supplier, as an example, and maybe made us a little bit more efficient, that's actually going to translate to, the company having slightly better gross profits. And that decision you made as a effect, and it's, you're almost trying to gamify the ability to actually create a sustainable and profitable business.
And for the sake of the audience, because when you hear gamification, it for some people, it kind of minimizes the impact of it. And what gamification means to me, and I'll let you add to this, is you're doing learning in chunks, right? You're doing much like you're getting to a next level on a video game, which I don't play, so I'm not going to get out of my area of expertise here. But you're working yourself to that next level, right? And in a lot of gamification programs, you can see where you are relative to your peers. So it adds that competitive aspect to it, that human nature. In fact, when I consulted an enterprise, we recommended a learning platform that was gamified, because it's easier to learn that way, right? So the platform was learn, do, inspire. In other words, it leveraged the learning part of it. It forced you to get out of the platform to go and do it, which you're doing in the job, right? So you're learning it in the platform, but I'm going to go apply it in my job. And then that third part, that inspiration part, was to create community, because there's so much knowledge in an organization that never gets drawn out of the people who are actually doing these activities on a regular basis. So am I describing something similar to what you?
Yes, in a sense, yeah. I mean, obviously, we start off with the management team, and we kind of build that. We bring it down and down and down and down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't just start off and it's going to be understood, right? So
right.
we do layer it in pieces of parts. I mean, even like say within Alloy, right? You know, I try to explain and I try to relate what a revenue target is for the month, like in us hitting a certain threshold, and then what that's going to mean, right? What is it going to mean to the company? What is it going to mean to your department? What is it going to mean to your role? All right. What is it going to mean to your career? Right. What does those thresholds mean? Right. And just explaining that and bringing it down, right, makes it meaning like, okay, oh wait, we did this. That means this now can happen.
Yeah,
right? Not that
it's context, Raj. I mean, if you think about the world that we live in, especially young people, I find don't get context. Why? Because they live in the world of social media and clips of everything. Everything's taken out of context, right? So the more context we can create for them in the business, the more we can connect the dots for them, the more we're creating better business people in our business.
Yeah. I'll give you another example of that very simplistic revenue target, right? There was obviously, numbers, oftentimes we just throw out numbers, right? But sometimes, the numbers aren't just there for growth. In this case, in the case of, say, Alloy as an example, we try to explain that really the reason why we're trying to get to these numbers is really to build away from some natural places of vulnerability we have as a relatively small business, right? We can't solve for role-to-role redundancies. We can't add more depth and talent, and we can't reduce down risk points we have with talent or tools and processes without having more in the bucket to basically spread through.
Yes.
Right. So, someone may say, my gosh, I'm the only person who does this XYZ role, right? And I only have one tool, but really I need the other one. I don't understand why I can't have more, right? Can't have more because the business is just at a point where it can't take on more expenses. Why? I'm trying to explain those things, right?
Which goes to that open book management concept.
Right.
And we've had other guests talk about that and the amount of engagement and creativity that's come out of their workforce from that. So what's your version of that? This is an example.
Basically showing. Yeah. So clear goals.
Yeah.
Right. Clear goals. And in the case of, say, Alloy as an example, I keep it very, very simple. It's a 2x2 box, right? We have a people and product goal, right? Our goals for that as a company. We have a quality goal, right? Good work means clients do more work with you. It's fairly simple, right? We have it's kind of an odd term, but I call it it's essentially a brand awareness, but we say, how badass are we? Right. As in,
you have a how badass are we bucket? I love it.
Yes, I do. Right. That's around.
Might add that here.
Yeah. Awards and recognition, both on the people side and our work product, right? How our brand is perceived in the marketplace, that matters. Perception oftentimes matters quite a bit, right? And then that last bucket is actually financials, right? Which are things like, revenue and EBITDA targets and so forth, right? So those 4 buckets then layer down that's the company, right? Every department also has those exact same 4 buckets, right? Every role then also has those same 4 buckets. Now the weighting may change. As an example, my head of HR, she may have a higher weighting within the people side of things, right, than she does around the work product. Although there's an element in there because her job is to bring in great talent that can do great work, right? So there's an element there. But say my chief creative officer, she's going to be much more weighted on the work side of things, right? And maybe less so on the individual people side of things. But there's still there's still some weighting there. So we can kind of tailor that, and everyone has that same framework down to the lowest level person, right? So they know how they're contributing their piece towards that, and how it ladders up to the department, and how it ladders up to the company, and why that matters to the company. And we keep that consistent every year.
I love that for so many reasons. I love that it builds context. I like that it takes you out of your silo and it makes you a contributor to all the important things of the company, not just your specific vertical or your specific piece of the company. I think that's fantastic. Let me ask.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jane. One thing because maybe to answer your other question, we're open about those. We report where we are at the end of the year. We plan out to those. I'm about to have a town held today. I'll kind of report where we are against those, right? In employer reviews, right? Those are part of it, right? So we integrate those same goals back into our review systems, and how they're measured, and so forth. The bonuses.
The other thing I like about that, Raj, is so many times when we're consulting in organizations, we end up seeing competing goals between departments, right? So you see that the company is not all moving in one direction. And when you dig down in there a little bit, what you see is they've been given objectives that actually force them to work against each other, not work all in the same direction. So I love how that's laid out.
I've actually been in organizations where I've been very unclear of my counterparts, goals, because it has meaning. Like, so I know, where they're pushing through and where I'm pushing through. This is when I've been part of large companies. And that's frustrating. It's like, it's almost operating with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah. I used to say to salespeople, the best way to understand how a customer is going to evaluate you is for you to figure out how they get measured in their job. That is the thing that will identify their priorities. And so it's no different in a mid-sized company, is it? If we have the capacity to share with each other what our goals are and how we're being measured, so that A, we know that we're all moving in the same direction or not, and B, we all know how to help each other to be successful inside the organization.
Yeah, it's actually, the other aspect of things is I often find that we also miss teaching people or exposing people about each other's roles and the highs and lows, right? So just a simple fact of a designer and a project manager truly understanding their roles and truly understanding the highs and lows that come with their day, right? And the hardships that come from it, and the celebrations that come from it. That very simple piece can bring a team together to actually fight as a team, as opposed to just do their role in their little silo.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how many times I'm asked to facilitate that between a client and a service provider. The same thing. Hey, when you do this, this is what happens on our side, to kind of work through that. So yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. When you do this is what I hear.
Yeah. Or when you do this at the last minute, this is what happens in my world. Not that I don't want to serve you. I do want to serve you, but this is the hand grenade that you just tossed into my world that you are probably unaware of, or you wouldn't have done it. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So let me go off course a little bit, specifically because you own a marketing agency and you're buying up other agencies. Tell me, we end up talking about AI every day, and nobody's got it figured out. But how do you see that impacting your business, Raj?
Yeah, I actually see it impacting it quite a lot. So both at the macro level, right, and also down to the individual talent level, right. What's fascinating is that it's less about, to be honest, the tools itself, but rather the construct change and the business model itself. So, tools wise, we started using, we've been using machine learning software for a while, some kind of pseudo elements of AI before AI was a thing, right? And certainly when ChatGPT came out, that kind of blew things up a lot more, right?
Yeah.
So, as an organization, we try to use the best tools available to us, so we can ideate, we can, do work more efficiently, and also with a higher quality, right? So that didn't change whether AI was here or not. We were going to be doing that regardless. So as an example, pre-ChatGPT, we were using a tool called Writer.ai, right, which allowed us to do our frontline editing. All our editing was basically filtered through this one product. And so we can kind of create a voice and tone for a client, and then any content creator, designer, and so forth or PR specialist can write content, put it through Writer, filter to the company, and it basically did our first line editing, right? So we're already doing things like that. It's almost like saying, hey, don't use, during that initial era of time, and there's a lot of agencies not doing anything or just doing it from a gimmick. We were doing it from a framework and quality and speed to market standpoint. So the way we view it is that AI as a whole introduces a different level of tooling for us, whether it's coding tools or creative design tools or content management systems or data and research abilities or ability to analyze things faster. We're going to embrace those, but we're going to embrace those within a framework. So we have a set methodology in how we work. And so we apply that same methodology, whether we're brainstorming in person or within a product and tool set. And we sort of apply that throughout. So that methodology remains the same. In my business, at least, we use frameworks and methodologies. We don't just use a tool. So it's not like, hey, go use ChatGPT or Gemini or pick your flavor, whatever. It's no, let's think through this in this set way. And yes, you should be using Gemini to help you, research something or put something into Notebook LM and dive into it and so forth, right? So that framework has already been in place for a while, and it's just making sure that our employees understand and know how to use that, and also use it in safeguard ways, because there's a lot of risk that comes in kind of using these things without truly verifying and then putting things out there, and then the agency is going to be very, very liable. So we have to be very, very careful. So, context, understanding frameworks, methodologies, and policies around it. Where the shift has been in my head, perhaps, right, over the last, probably 6 to 9 months is really when agentic roles started to really push through. Those allowed you to basically start developing post-trained models in order to complete a function or a job, right? So my business, the agency business that is a very talent-based business, right? And as a result, we have typically been able to scale really with only talent, right? So if we win, a $5 million contract, we're generally going to add 3 to 4 million in payroll. It's a very linear growth, unlike software. The notion of actually creating synthetic roles or agentic roles changes our dynamic of our business dramatically. So if you think about it from that standpoint, the entire services industry is having to rethink their business model, whether this is an accounting firm, a law firm, an agency, or consultancy. Anyone that's based on revenue and people in a linear fashion, we're suddenly having to rethink, well, revenue growth doesn't now have to totally equal people. It can also include, essentially agentic roles or, synthetic roles assigned with people. The crux of it is how you still maintain a very strong work output, and where it makes sense and where you're still generating great ideas. For me, you can use all the tools in the world, but if you can't create high quality ideas that kind of break through, it really doesn't matter. Just because you can create a lot doesn't mean it's going to be great.
Yes. And you said something that I think is so important and probably more articulately than I say it, which is it's not about the tools. It's about what the tool can enable in your business. So I find people say to me, what should I be doing with ChatGPT in my business, Jane? And I say, that's not the right question. The right question is, what can we better enable in our business with a tool like that? Or to your point, where can we improve the framework that we already have, right? Which is a lot more articulate, I think, than my way, because people don't always understand what I mean when I say, what can we enable in our business? But how can we improve efficiency, productivity, creativity within our framework? That's the question to ask.
Yeah.
And right now, I think a lot of people are too much focused on the tool and not enough focused on what their model is and what can be improved in their business model.
I think there's two things that's going on out right now. There's people just, concentrating too much on the tool, like you said, right? And like any tool, you have to spend some time to understand how to get the best out of it, right? And a lot of the LLMs that we see out there, really, you have to have skill in asking the right question. You have to have an ability to critically think and do so. And if you can't do that, it's just going to be garbage in, garbage out, right? So frameworks truly matter in thinking through and framing up. What is it really we're trying to ask here, right? And how are we getting the answers and how are we interpreting that into the right kind of right outputs, right? The other side is fear. There's a ton of fear, right? This is going to replace my job, right?
Yeah.
This is going to, change things that I'm used to, right? And in some cases that is true, but in other cases, it's a case of, adapting to a new skill and a new tool set. It's not easy by any means, but it's certainly there. A couple of years ago when we started with Writer.ai, right? The one thing that we found was that what does Writer AI do, right? As an example, and there's many other tools. I'm not advocating for this one necessarily, right? But it's basically an editing. It allows you to, train on a client's voice and tone, specific words you want to use, the objectives you want. So you're kind of creating that framing, if you will, right? And then you're basically putting content in there to then edit it down, right? So that used to be done manually, right? And you'd have to spend cycles in training, 2-3 writers to know the ins and outs of that brand, and no one else could touch others. It sounded completely off base and all that stuff, right? So it kind of allowed us to basically open up from 2 or 3 writers to many writers using, creating content and ideas, really ideas. But what we did find was that a writer, as an example, right, they've spent their entire career, editing. And by suddenly saying you're not going to be editing, it took a huge chunk of what they did away, right? Now, they didn't get into writing or storytelling to edit at all. They got into writing and storytelling because they loved writing and storytelling and creating ideas. That's what they were great at, right? But we trained them to edit. And so 80% of their job was actually editing and 20% was maybe actually storytelling and writing. So to suddenly say someone, hey, that you spent your entire career being beaten by your professors and your creative director or whatever it may be to get this perfect and everything else, and now you're taking this away, there's going to be resistance, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be fear. So one thing that we started figuring out is that we had to create a grieving process for them. Literally, you got to grieve something that you're great at, but realize that this thing can also help you and do it more efficiently and get back to what you really started your career at.
Yeah.
What you're great at and what we hired you for is because you can create great stories and great ideas. So now spend time on that. But they have to spend probably 6 months to 9 months grieving that. Same thing with software engineers. It's hard for them to suddenly they've learned, PHP or Python or whatever, and now you're saying you're not going to actually code. You have to code next to Copilot, and it's going to do things faster and better than you. That is tough to take in as a human. So grieve, understand, and then adapt. Right.
So two things strike me there. Years ago, somebody said to me about technology. Technology is a great servant. It's a horrible master. And the same is true of AI, right? We have to learn to use AI as a servant and not let it be the master. But you talk about...
It has to become a habit. It has to become a habit.
Yeah. The other thing you said that is just, and something we've talked about before, is this period of loss that you have when something that you're accustomed to is taken away from you. And we initially talked about it in the companies that you buy with S1, right? But these things where we're putting AI inside of our organization, these are change initiatives. And they're pretty impactful change initiatives. You might not think of it as a CEO that it's a big deal that we're implementing this tool, but you really are asking somebody to be different at work. How do you help people get through that, Raj? I mean, you talked about it like a mourning period, and that's exactly what it is. That is no exaggeration.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
So I think one, you have to create habits around it, right? What we saw probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago is that when we just said, go use Gemini. We're a big Gemini shop because we're mainly a big Google shop, right? But we also Copilot and OpenAI and so forth. But if we just said go do it, right? People get lost. It's just too much. It really is. So you've got to break it down into small bite-sized chunks and say, okay, try this, and then do show and tells. We do it like we're having a company town hall in 30, 40 minutes or so, right? We're going to have a head of strategy kind of show and tell how they're using it, right? So it doesn't become like this black box. Oh my gosh, right. And even this tiniest little things, like, hey, I created this and look, it helped me with this. And so we kind of do a lot of show and tell and try and create routine and people using the tool sets, and then bring everyone back to this is our methodology. How do we think through our methodology and apply it into these tools, right? How would you apply our methodology in writing a creative brief or strategy brief in the exact same way, in the exact same question you do within Gemini or ChatGPT, right? So it has to be very, very deliberate, and you have to take it in bite sizes. You can't just throw it and shove it down people's throats. It's not going to work.
And don't you find that people experience that differently? Like they care about different aspects of what's changing, right? So you have to meet them really where they are. You can't manage that as a group. It's not a group activity. It's an individual activity for a manager.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, because here's the other side of things. There's great talent. And there's a world of knowledge that they're built up, right? And that is incredibly more valuable than how they can use ChatGPT or not, right? So we have to then oftentimes just think through, listen, this is a great strategist, right? How can we bring them up, right, to learn these skills? And perhaps sometimes it's augmenting them with someone else who has that skills, but doesn't have the domain knowledge that they have that can then make them a bit more efficient. And as they learn, they get a bit more efficient. So sometimes you're augmenting with others who have ability to pick up those things a little faster. But just because someone can pick up how to use a certain tool doesn't mean that they're going to have all that world experience and knowledge to listen to, a CMO and deal with
to know what to do with it.
That's right. Yeah.
I probably shouldn't admit this to you, but I'm in an online community, an AI community, and mostly I'm a lurker. But it's an online version of what you're saying, which is they're showing each other, this is how I leveraged it to benefit my business. And the amount of creativity in this group just absolutely blows my mind. So I could see where in a company like yours, where everybody's really clear on where we're going, we know what we care about, that kind of creativity when you're sharing it, like in a town hall like that, can be really powerful in your moving your organization forward.
Yeah. And it encourages others to kind of like play around and try things, right? And try to create safe environments where you can do that. And only, when we're ready with client work, where we're exposing it out, we have to be, as a business as well, we have to be very, very cautious about how we tread into that.
I was just going to ask you about that. What are your clients requiring of you?
It's interesting. It's actually interesting. There's no set thing that they're necessarily requiring. So we obviously operate within a master service agreement type framework, and so there's certainly confidentiality and privacy and so forth, right? We haven't necessarily had clients ask us for specific things, but as a business, we have an AI policy as an example, right? And how we use things, how we never put anything out there generated by an AI tool, just not going to happen because we still don't believe in the verification of that. But, we tell clients, hey, listen, we're going to be using these tools. Are you comfortable with it? Right? Yeah. They're not going to be, we're not using these to create the outputs in any way, but we're doing it because we think we can be more efficient for you, right?
Yeah.
There's actually what's interesting in the regulated side of things. So we have some banking clients and some fintech clients. What's interesting is that their ability to access any of these tools is very limited, right? No security and compliance officer is allowing.
Yeah, I would bet in pharma too.
That's right. So we're often actually asked to be, the agency to help them with that. As an example, they can send us anonymized data, survey data as an example, right? That has zero PI information at all. And we can basically use our tool sets to analyze that data 10 times as fast as they can. So ironically, they're actually bypassing the internal frameworks to move into us because we've put strong frameworks and they can trust in our frameworks in place. And, comes down to whoever in the entire organization also understands that one misstep by one person, right, affects the entire company.
I was just going to say, it is so easy to step in it right now. Because it is still a bit of a Wild West.
It is a Wild West. Yes.
We had a scenario where my team posted a case study on LinkedIn. And it's not a company we worked with, just a company that we respected what they had accomplished. They put this case study online and the CMO wrote to me and said, "Where did you get that data?" And I went to my team and I'm like, if you tell me that this is an AI generated thing, my head is about to pop off. And fortunately it was not, but it is very easy to step in it right now and leverage AI in an unsafe way. So that's the
So
little.
yeah, so it's interesting. We had Lauren. I'm forgetting Lauren's name. Is a great attorney in town. She came in for a lunch and learn to kind of explain what was happening out there, right? And some of
Yeah.
the risk points, not to scare employees, but to just show how easy it is that a mistake can actually cripple an entire company.
Well,
Right?
it's like your open book management. It just puts context to a thing that you're
That's
doing
right.
every day and says to you, "Hey, these are the guardrails
But
to watch out for."
the great thing about our team is that they experiment, right? And then we find places. So as your example of that research, there's plenty of studies, that are done for our companies and that we do. And those are good verified information. But we use a tool called Google Notebook LM. It's just great, right? Because you can basically put in
too.
all the information, right?
Yep.
And it's not going to make up things beyond that. Right?
Yep.
So we do have we have a fun Slack channel of it's an AI channel that talks about when an AI engine is basically having hallucinations, and everyone kind of finds it funny because we kind of go through and especially Roger, my head of technology, he kind of asks the questions and leads the LLM down a path, and it's just making up stuff, and we all kind of find it funny. But we know that those examples, that's where you're going to get in trouble. Do not.
Well, see, Raj, I've learned to go into AI and say, put a bookmark everywhere that you put a case study or data in there that you have not verified. Mm-hmm. So I tell the tool to go in and point out where it made up crap, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because early on, I would just assume, you know what your mother said about assuming, right? I would just assume that it was right. And I've learned to tell it to go in there. Now, I love the Notebook LLM for the same reason. It's my own stuff. You're using my own material. And so I know that it's validated. But I have said to AI applications before, go in and tell me where you made crap up, but put a bookmark there for me, Oh my gosh. Oh, go ahead.
I do think what's interesting is that, every role can benefit from, learning new tools, right? It's to be honest, I don't think I could function without spell check or Grammarly, right?
Or for me, GPS. If I was forced to know where to go, I would never go anywhere.
Yeah, right. So, I think, going back to taking elements of the fear out where you can, right? And not saying you can't, you can do it everywhere. But, I always give this example. I started off as a designer, right? So I have a lot of interest in it, but I'm no longer a designer, just to be clear. Okay. But let's take type. Type was a skill that, you had typesetter, right? And you'd create fonts and stuff like that. And an ability to do that skill, right? That skill is no longer needed, right? So at some point I had to let go of the ability to create type, right? Because I could use Illustrator, Photoshop, and it did it way faster. And I learned that, right? And nowadays, I don't have to use those things. If I was to do it, I'd imagine that you can probably go into some of the design tools, and it's just, you can create a type font for you off the like that, right, within seconds, right? So it didn't mean that me as, not necessarily as a typesetter, but this typesetter skill, right? It was valuable because I can see what was good and what was bad. That was the skill that was valuable, right? And applying it into a new tool set mattered. Right. So it's recognizing how people actually have extremely valuable skills. And I always say we try to build creativity with generative AI, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. It's not one or the other.
I agree 100%. I agree 150%. So, getting rid of some of that fear, I think, is important. Well, we're running up against time, which I hate. especially when we get in these interesting conversations, because you've really added a ton of value. The way I usually end, Raj, I didn't warn you about this, is with a series of rapid fire questions. Are you up for it? It's 4 or 5.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. What are you reading right now, or who are you following that would be interesting to folks?
Yeah. So I'm more of a podcaster, to be honest, less of a reader. So I've been listening to the Acquired podcast quite a bit, which kind of takes you. I don't know if you know that's the
Acquired.
Podcast. Yeah, it's called Acquired, and they're doing a story on Google right now. So they kind of go very deep. These are like 4 to 6 hour podcasts, right? Okay. And they go deep on a company. But I just finished listening to the story of Epic Systems with the female founder, who's an absolute rock star and is probably the most valuable healthcare software company that exists that
I've worked with
knows
it.
about.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating story of her and her rise and really how she's building that company, which is not what you'd expect. So it's an incredible story. I didn't know much about this company.
Podcast. Love it.
Yeah, check out the Epic episode. It's fantastic. Yeah.
What one thing did you learn early in your career that you think impacted your success?
So I would say naivety. It was okay to be naive because just because I didn't know how to do something, that didn't mean that I couldn't go create something. So oftentimes naivety is a breeding ground for ideation, right? Because oftentimes you don't know any better and you go do things.
Oh, then I'm in great shape. Thank you.
Me too.
For the validation. What do you hope young people in business will learn?
The business is twofolded. It's about humans and human relations and how you kind of tie those two things together. And I hope that's not a lost art. And then the second is that in business, the language of business is numbers. And so getting a firm understanding of that can really, really help you out.
Yeah, I used to send salespeople to a book called Financial Intelligence. I'm like, if you don't know how you save customers money or make their business more effective, you're not going to be very good at your job. So go read this,
Jane, I'm an ex-creative. So like for me to even think that I'd be in numbers is
me too.
Like, for me, that was like a mental, like, no. That's someone else's job.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I thought those people were horrifically boring. And now I'm kind of one of them. They say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. What do you wish you had done 20 years ago that you do now?
I don't know if I'd done anything different, to be honest. Yeah. I always say I never have any kind of regrets or redos because the decisions I made at the time were based on the knowledge I had and the experiences I was having. So it led me to where I am today. So I don't know if there's anything I'd want to change about that journey.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't think there's any point in regrets. They got you where you are right now, whatever you did, right? Yeah. What do you do when you feel stuck?
I try to go for a walk. I give myself a kind of 9-minute rule, 8-minute rule. I think if I start something and if I'm struggling with it within 8 minutes, I'll stop and go do something else and then come back to it. Yeah. So knowing when to stop, right, as opposed to just keep on trunching it through.
Just stop banging your head against the wall, right?
Yeah, it's context switching sometimes. Yeah.
Great. Raj, this has been really a blast. I appreciate you so much. And I think you've added a lot of value to our listeners today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well, Jane. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. That's a wrap for this episode of CEOs Unscripted, where real talk fuels real growth. I hope today's conversation gave you fresh insights and inspiration for your own leadership journey. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a candid conversation with a trailblazing leader. Until next time, keep leading with intention, growing with grit, and driving for results. I'm Jane Gentry, and this is CEOs Unscripted. See you next time.